I was amped up, I felt good, I was sure I was healed, so I gave the most positive, gung-ho, pro-vegan diet interview I possibly could have, because I thought that a whole food, plant-based vegan diet had healed me from ulcerative colitis. And it was a mistake. My name is Kenny Honnas, and I've been able to fully heal myself from a very severe case of ulcerative colitis by nutritionally optimizing my gut microbiome. My healing timeline has gotten a little confusing due to the order I've decided to make videos in, so this video is all about setting the record straight. I'm going to start at my diagnosis and walk entirely through my timeline, explaining what I did, what my thought process was, and what ultimately allowed me to heal. I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis in 2014, after a 2-week hospital stay in which I had 4 blood transfusions, heavy doses of corticosteroids, 30-pound weight loss. I was eventually able to go home. I did not believe that healing this disease was possible, but my mother did. My mother encouraged me every day to keep fighting and keep trying to find a way to heal. She discovered a guy named Michael Hurst who was able to heal himself using fecal microbial transplants, or also known as FMTs. She convinced me to give FMTs a try, so we did several home treatments of FMTs, and they were all unsuccessful. I now believe they were unsuccessful because I made no dietary changes whatsoever, and I was also still taking the medication Lialda at the time, which our GI later told us was known to cause diarrhea in certain people. I went back to school at Wheaton College starting January of 2015. I was taking large doses of prednisone and a ton of natural herbs, supplements, and anti-inflammatories that we were hoping would heal me. None of that worked. I continued to flare on and off the whole semester, and my skepticism of ever healing continued to grow. Towards the end of the semester, I was in utter physical and emotional turmoil. I knew I couldn't live like this for the rest of my life. I knew there had to be some way to fix this. So when school was out for the summer, something just clicked. I had a total shift in mentality. I decided I was going to dedicate myself to healing and exhaust any and every possible way I could think of in an attempt to heal. That's when I discovered a video on YouTube that claimed drinking 32 ounces of cabbage juice per day could heal ulcerative colitis in just 1 week. So I quit all medication and then started juicing immediately. I had been flaring for 2 months at the time that I began juicing. My symptoms increased and got worse the first 3 days, but on the night of the 3rd day, I had my first soft-formed stool in 2 months. Still bloody and painful, but it had form. It didn't heal me in 1 week, but I was so convinced by the positive results I was seeing that I continued juicing for 30 days and saw a significant decrease in bleeding, urgency, mucus, and frequency. I felt almost 70% better for the first time since my diagnosis. At this point, I was sold on the idea that plants were the answer to healing IBD. So when I discovered High Carb Health on YouTube, I reached out to them and signed up for their program at the end of June 2015. Around this same time, I also had some blood work done, the results of which dealt another devastating blow to my health. My testosterone levels had significantly dropped. I assume this was due to the heavy doses of corticosteroids I had received while in the hospital, as well as the chronically elevated inflammation, cortisol, and general stress levels. I was now fighting 2 battles, one against ulcerative colitis and the other to increase my testosterone levels. I wanted to be aggressive on both fronts. I did not want to take testosterone replacement therapy, but I was open to taking HCG in the hopes of jump-starting my own natural testosterone production. So I began following High Carb Health's vegan diet protocol, as well as taking HCG and some powerful estrogen blockers. I was in pretty good shape because of the cabbage juice, so the transition from my cabbage juice protocol to the vegan diet was relatively smooth. High Carb Health explained that their clients typically go through a worsening of symptoms when beginning the vegan protocol, and this can last for weeks or months before things start to improve. I did not experience this. Because I had just finished juicing cabbage for so long, I had already undergone significant healing that made my transition to the vegan diet almost effortless. There were a few rocky patches here and there for the first few weeks, but no significant flare-ups or increase of symptoms. In fact, those lingering mild symptoms I was still having that I could not get rid of with the cabbage juice were slowly starting to fade. Roughly 1 month into the vegan diet, I felt amazing. 3 solid bowel movements a day, which was normal for me before my diagnosis, and no other symptoms. I was thrilled. At the end of the summer, I headed back to Wheaton feeling healthy and confident that I had found the answer. I also felt as if my testosterone was improving with the help of the HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin. Around this time, I took this photo that showed how much my health had improved since I was released from the hospital in October of 2014. And then things started rolling downhill. 3 days after I started school again, I started noticing symptoms returning. I could not figure out why this was happening because I was following the vegan healing diet very strictly with almost zero deviation outside the guidelines. Soon I was in a full-fledged flare that I could not get under control. Multiple bowel movements throughout the day, bloody diarrhea, urgency, frequency, and I was sprinting to the toilet 2 to 3 times per night. I stopped venturing outside my dorm except for when I absolutely had to because I was afraid I was going to poop myself in public. Around this time, I also decided to stop injecting myself with HCG and stop taking other medications and supplements that I was using to boost my testosterone levels. The flare raged on for 3 weeks before I finally realized what had changed since coming back to school. Water. I went from drinking clean well water from my home in Texas to drinking heavily chlorinated tap water. I had been drinking 3 liters of this tap water per day at least. A quick Google search seemed to suggest that drinking heavily chlorinated water can wreak havoc on the gut microbiome, which I did not know much about at this point, and it could cause a flare-up. I immediately ordered a countertop reverse osmosis water purifier. I drank with that water and I cooked with that water exclusively from then on. I was able to calm the flare down somewhat, but I could already tell that I had undone all of the healing I had achieved that summer. I half-heartedly juiced cabbage on and off again for a few weeks while also continuing to adhere to High Carb Health's vegan diet, but I did not have the discipline to drink 32 ounces of cabbage juice per day like I did the first time over the summer. I was finally able to get the flare to subside around a month after I changed the water I was drinking, but I did not feel as good as I did before the flare. The bleeding had stopped, my stools were sometimes formed, but there was still urgency and increased frequency at around 6 bowel movements per day. And I felt like this level of health was fragile, as if I could spiral out of control into a flare again if I ate the wrong thing. At the end of the fall semester, I took another turn for the worse. Ever so often, less than once per month, I would allow myself to have a cheat meal from Chipotle. I didn't do this while flaring, but if I felt okay, I would treat myself to a vegan bowl that contained white rice, beans, veggies, salsa, and guac. I loved it so much. It helped keep me sane since I typically ate the same thing every day. Unfortunately, fall of 2015 was when there was the big outbreak of E. coli in several Chipotle chain restaurants in several different states. And there were reported cases in Illinois, the state I was going to school in. I can't verify this for sure because it was not confirmed by a doctor or any kind of test, but I remember eating Chipotle as a celebratory meal at the end of the semester before going home. When I got home, I started experiencing one of the most horrible flares of my life. It was different than my previous flares. In the past, my worst symptoms when flaring were bleeding and excessive diarrhea. However, this time, I had very minimal bleeding, but the diarrhea seemed even more excessive than in the past, and the pain was unbearable. I'm convinced that I was a victim of the Chipotle E. coli outbreak and that it triggered the intense flare. For 3 weeks during the Christmas break, I barely ate. I isolated myself in my room, but I had to frequently sprint to the bathroom. I sat on the toilet in mental and physical agony for hours every day, too scared to eat more than a few bananas per day. I was afraid to drink cabbage juice, and really I was afraid to try anything. After the Christmas break ended, I started the spring semester at a new school, still feeling horrible. I started trying to eat more and trying to heal once again, but it just seemed to make things worse. I could not sleep well at all because I kept having to wake up and sprint to the toilet. So I decided to try something extreme. I did a 7-day water fast, which I do not recommend doing extended water fasts without medical supervision because they can be very dangerous. I ate no food and drank 2 to 3 liters of reverse osmosis water every day. I minimized my physical activity throughout the day, but I still walked to class and took care of my normal responsibilities that week. After 2 to 3 days, I was finally able to sleep through the night because I did not have anything in my system to pass and nothing that was irritating or exacerbating my inflamed colon. The fast was very difficult mentally, but when I finally broke the fast and resumed the vegan healing diet, I noticed that a lot of the symptoms from the possible E. coli-induced flare had dramatically diminished. I was no longer having a clawing-like pain in my stomach, the diarrhea had decreased, and I was no longer having to sprint to the bathroom at night anymore. Over the next month, I started to improve again. I simply adhered to High Carb Health's guidelines and followed them day in and day out. I had also decided to start taking HCG and other medications again in an attempt to jumpstart my natural testosterone production. An odd side effect of these medications was that they caused my face to swell, much like prednisone. By late February, early March of 2016, I was feeling very good digestively. I felt pretty much 100%. 3 solid bowel movements a day, the bleeding had stopped, no pain, no mucus, and no urgency. But I was still adhering very closely to the vegan healing diet and not venturing far outside the guidelines. For all intents and purposes, I believed I was healed. I thought I had jumped that final hurdle and was where I wanted to be. At around this time, High Carb Health reached out to me and asked me if I would do an interview explaining my healing process and the success I was having with the vegan diet. I was amped up, I felt good, I was sure I was healed, so I gave the most positive, gung-ho, pro-vegan diet interview I possibly could have because I thought that a whole food, plant-based vegan diet had healed me from ulcerative colitis. And it was a mistake. It was a mistake because I really did not know if I was actually healed because I had not tested it yet. The definition of healed that I was looking for was to be able to consume a full range of foods without bleeding, mucus, urgency, or diarrhea, to have well-formed, solid bowel movements, and to be on no medication. Besides the medication I was taking for my testosterone, I wasn't taking any medication for IBD purposes, so that was a check. I was not experiencing bleeding, mucus, urgency, or diarrhea, and I was having well-formed, solid bowel movements, so that was a check. But I wasn't eating a full range of foods. I was only eating foods that were approved on the vegan healing diet. And since I started feeling good, I had not ventured outside of those guidelines. So I did not know if I would still be feeling good if I went and ate out at a restaurant or ate any kind of junk food. And I had not eaten any animal products yet either, so I did not know how those foods would affect me. And healing to me meant that I would be able to indulge in all of these foods once I had finally healed. It meant that I wouldn't be confined to a strict set of rules or a strict diet all of the time. And besides that, I had only been feeling good for a few weeks. I hadn't waited nearly enough time to know if I had actually healed or not. I didn't know if I was fully healed or if I was just in a period of remission after a year of being in and out of flare-ups. So for these reasons, I regret and think it was entirely inappropriate for me to claim that I was fully healed in that interview. I simply didn't put enough thought into whether I was actually healed or not. I was just so excited that I wasn't having any symptoms and that I was on no medication. One other side note. I chose this photo that I took in August of 2015 to send to High Carb Health as my transformation picture. Once again, this photo was taken right around the time I was heading back to Wheaton College when I had only been vegan for a little over 1 month. At the time of this photo, I felt and looked really healthy right before I started flaring again due to the chlorinated water at school. I chose to send High Carb Health this photo because it was the one I looked the best in, even though I looked nothing like this at the time of our interview, as you can see. This was disingenuous, and I wish I had sent a photo that better represented the level of health I was at when I participated in the interview. After the interview, I wanted to continue trudging forward and try to get as healthy as I possibly could, feel even better than I already did. So something that's really advocated in the vegan community is being a raw vegan. I decided I wanted to do 45 days of only eating raw fruits and vegetables. I finished 45 days of a raw vegan diet and thought I had finally put UC behind me for good. 1 week later, because I thought I was healed, I decided that I was going to eat out at a Thai restaurant and get some awesome vegan stir-fry. It tasted great. I was so happy that I was getting to eat out again and experience the freedom that I wanted so badly. The next day, I noticed that my stool wasn't formed very well, and there was visible mucus. Being worried about this, I went back to my safe foods from the healing vegan diet for the next week. But I again went out to eat the next weekend to test whether or not I could venture away from the vegan diet without a return of symptoms. Because if I couldn't do that, then that meant I was not healed yet. After eating out, the same result occurred. Symptoms started returning: blood, mucus, and loose stool. I was very frustrated. When adhering closely to High Carb Health's healing vegan diet guidelines, I was fine and had no symptoms. But I could not venture outside of those guidelines without experiencing symptoms. That wasn't what I was looking for. That wasn't what I wanted. I was feeling very dissatisfied and very discouraged. On top of that, I was waking up in the mornings and my hands were on fire. They were burning. They were tingly and had this burning sensation early in the morning every time I woke up. For the first few weeks, I thought I was sleeping weird and cutting off blood flow to my hands or something, but the pain kept getting worse. After some quick research, I realized these symptoms are commonly caused by a vitamin B12 deficiency, which is an area of concern with the vegan diet. So I megadosed on vitamin B12 and the issue resolved itself in a few weeks. If I had not realized that the pain was caused by a vitamin B12 deficiency, I could have caused myself some serious and even permanent nerve damage. When the semester ended, I went home to Texas for the summer with a moderate flare-up of symptoms: urgency, diarrhea, mild increase in frequency, mild bleeding, and mucus. For the duration of the summer, I had mild to moderate symptoms on and off again while remaining on the vegan diet. At this time, I was also starting to learn about and study the gut microbiome. I kept reading that patients with IBD all had characteristic dysbiosis of the gut microbiome compared to normal, healthy subjects. That seemed pretty obvious to me that the gut microbiome must have something to do with the pathogenesis of IBD. Everything I read said that patients with IBD had a messed up gut microbiome. So I started thinking that if I could restore my gut microbiome to a healthy state, then perhaps IBD would go away for good and I would truly heal. That is when I finally jumped ship in regards to the vegan diet. While studying the gut microbiome, it was clear that plant foods were a big part of optimizing the gut microbiome. I believed that the vegan diet could be used to optimize the gut microbiome and heal ulcerative colitis. Dr. David Klein did it that way, Shamiz from High Carb Health did it that way, and I was so close to doing it twice on the vegan diet. So I thought I could have stuck with the vegan diet and made some modifications to it in order to aggressively optimize the gut microbiome and finally heal. But I did not want to be vegan. I wanted to have the autonomy and complete freedom to eat every kind of food, including animal products. I did not want to confine myself to only being able to eat plant foods. Not only that, but the information I was reading made me think that I would be able to optimize my gut microbiome faster if I ate high-powered probiotic fermented foods like raw milk kefir. So, while I think that a modified plant-based vegan diet can be a great way to optimize the gut microbiome and reverse IBD, I chose a different route. I decided I wanted to follow the protocol that gave me the greatest freedom and the one that I thought would heal me the fastest. So I decided to implement a targeted gut microbiome optimizing approach that included raw milk, kefir, fermented vegetables, fruits, tubers, and high-quality meats, instead of continuing on with the vegan diet. I began this approach in August of 2016. I was only experiencing mild UC symptoms at the time. I was not in a bad flare, so the transition was actually pretty smooth. I also quit taking HCG and other medications meant to help boost my testosterone as well. It took 2 full months until I felt completely healed. And then I spent a 3rd month testing my freedom and experimenting with eating out to verify that I actually had healed. In November of 2016, I finally achieved my goal and definition of healing. I can eat anything I want to, including greasy junk food, without any symptoms whatsoever. I'm on no medication. I do not have bleeding, urgency, mucus, or diarrhea. And I do have well-formed solid bowel movements. 2 years later, in 2018, I had a colonoscopy and a biopsy performed that confirmed I'm in clinical and endoscopic remission. Healing is possible.